Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another Talent Talks podcast. I'm your host, Scott Rivers, and I am looking forward to another great show. Today's guest is not going to disappoint as we're looking at 2020 and wrapping it up. It's now December. I can't believe it. It's already December. Christmas will be here before we know it. And then after that, we've got 2021. And I hope all of you are ready to come out the gates running in 2021. Today's guest is going to help you do that. Before I go any further, I want to remind you, you have access to a free tool on our website. If you go to cercatalent.com, you can download a free book, The Art of Hiring A Players Today. This book was written for you in order to help you identify and attract and engage and ultimately hire the best talent in the market today. Whether you're using an outside firm or not, this will definitely help you. It also talks about employment branding, which is more important today than ever. So check it out for free, The Art of Hiring A Players Today on our site, cercatalent.com. Today's guest is one that I've been following for a long time, and I think that, like I said earlier, you're going to get a lot out of this as you look at building your plan for 2021. Today's guest is John Barrows. As with all of our guests, you'll find him on LinkedIn. You can see this right here if you're looking on YouTube. If not, I will have the link in the show notes. Check him out on LinkedIn. After you listen to this, if it brings value, which I know it will, go ahead and reach out to him on LinkedIn. Let him know that you heard about him on the Talent Talks podcast. I recommend that in addition to that you go ahead and check out his website. Now, if you go to his website, which is jbarrows.com, you'll find all of the things that John offers. He offers sales training, both from an individual standpoint as well as for groups, and he also does events. And so you'll find out all of that if you go to his website. That is at jbarrows.com. Also, if you are looking for individual training, which I got to tell you, I mentioned this in the podcast and I'm dead serious. I lose money on these podcasts. I signed up for this. There's a lot of good content in here, and John talks about it in our show today. So listen to that. If you find it useful, go ahead and click on the individuals or for individuals on JB Sales. You can see the pricing there. I think it's extremely reasonable. And like I said, I went ahead and bought it. The next thing is Make It Happen Mondays is his podcast. I find this to be tremendously valuable. I find the guests to be engaging and knowledgeable. And again, John brings just a ton of value here. Lastly, you can see his book that he's written. He's actually written a children's book, and that book is called I Want to Be in Sales When I Grow Up. Imagine that, a book about sales from a sales guy like John. I think that this is cool. We don't really get into it on the show today, but I wanted to bring it up because I think it is cool, and it definitely speaks to the fact that this guy is always innovating, always trying to get better, and always trying to, frankly, give away as much of his information as possible. Do me a favor. If you're listening to this and getting any value, go ahead and give us a rating wherever it is that you're listening, whether it's on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Give us a rating on any of those platforms. It will help us out tremendously and allow more people to get this content. Again, if it's helping you, it can help somebody else. Please do that for us. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my friend, John Barrows. Ladies and gentlemen, John Barrows is on the show today. I know that I gave a quick introduction early on. It's really impossible to go through all of the things that he's done. And I'll tell you, as I've started learning from him and started gathering information and even preparing for this, I'm sold. I am a fan, and I am looking forward to learning more from you today and even after today. John, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, for having me on. I appreciate it, man.
Well, let's give everyone some more background. Like I said, I gave them a little bit of an introduction, but it's impossible to really talk about, some of the stuff that you've done without hearing it directly from you. Do me a favor, give our listeners a little bit of the background. How did you get where you are today? There was a small company called Thrive Networks that kind of put everything on the map, but, start from wherever you want to start and tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'll try to make it brief here, but there is some context to the audience too. Grew up here in Boston, still live here, went down to Maryland, drank my way through 4 years of college, got my degree in marketing because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and then got out into sales or got out into the real world and realized that I didn't want to do that, just like everybody else, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very rare. I mean, you were starting to finally see that you can get a degree in sales in some universities, but back then you couldn't. So I fell in just like everybody else. So my first job was DeWalt, right? Driving around, giving away free tools to construction workers, which was pretty cool. Then I sold copiers at Xerox, right? And that's where I got my real sales education. Talk about selling a commodity, right? It's like 45 pages a minute over 42 pages a minute. Ooh. And I mean, talk about knocking on door. I mean, literally knocking on doors with a copier in tow, trying to, have the client come talk to me, right? Did that for a year and a half. Then I started Thrive. So a couple of buddies of mine from high school, we got together and we started an outsourced IT services firm where we did outsourced IT services for the SMB market. So companies under 200 employees, we manage their infrastructure, servers, workstation, backup, security. We actually had a lot of life sciences, biotech, pharma clients here in Boston.
I bet you did.
And, I was 23, so I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So, and we were self-funded too, by the way. We had no money. So I was the sales, marketing, PR engine that was. And so I took every training there was. I took Sandler, Miller, Hyman, Taz, Spin, you name the sales methodology, and I took it. And I came across this company called Basho, and Basho was the first training that I took that I really liked. And the reason was because it was super tactical. It wasn't this big theory about selling or this huge process I had to follow. It was like, hey, here's how to send an email. Here's how to make a phone call. So I used it to help grow Thrive up. We ended up being the fastest growing company in Massachusetts for a few years in a row. Got us to about 12 million in revenues, about 85 employees. And then we sold it off to Staples. So Staples came and bought us. And spent about a year going through that integration. Come to find out, apparently I'm not a corporate guy. I don't have much of a filter, and I really don't like playing politics. So after a little while, Staples offered me another position, which was a really nice way of firing me. And I was looking for a job, and Basho said, John, you want to be a trainer? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. And they're like, why not? I'm like, I don't like trainers. Because up until that point in my career, the only type of sales trainers I'd ever come across were either failed sales professionals or professional presenters. Mm-hmm. And, if you ever been through a training, we could tell the guy's never actually done what they're telling you what to do. I didn't want to be that guy. And so they said, don't worry, you have to use these techniques to sell so you can train, so you can get paid. Right. I was like, all right, I like this. Practice what you preach. Joined Basho, took on some bigger accounts, brought on some bigger ones. And then to make a very long story short, they screwed it all up and I took it over. So they fired everybody. 2007 hit, right? Restructured the company, went all in on software. I took the training, started with another business partner, then went off on my own about 8 years ago with Jay Barrows. And now I'm working with a lot of SaaS companies. So Salesforce, LinkedIn, Box, Dropbox, Google, Slack, a lot of the kind of high growth companies there.
Yeah. Big
not
names.
That this is what's that? Yeah.
That's
not bad.
Big names.
I mean, and it's not that this is SaaS training. It's just, I like playing in the SaaS world because we were talking about this before. Innovation, right? SaaS obviously innovates from a tech standpoint, but they also innovate from a sales standpoint.
Right.
Because it, like Salesforce, they're one of my biggest clients. If I'm training Salesforce on the same stuff I was training them on 2 or 3 years ago, they're not renewing my contract, right? So I got to update. So for me, I'm CEO of my own little company here. I got 7 employees. I still prospect every day. Mm-hmm. I still do a little bit of prospecting every day. I also manage 10 to 20 deals in my pipeline at any given point in time. And I also cross-sell, upsell into existing accounts. So I do all those things while, before COVID, flying all around the world and doing these trainings. Now I do them all remotely while managing a team and everything else. So
yeah, very cool. You mentioned something earlier about, growing up in Xerox, and that was kind of your first step in sales training. I think so many people are missing that today. I don't care if it's Cutco, Xerox, whatever it is, people need to jump into sales. They need to understand what it means to present, to get your head bashed in, to get the door slammed on you. And we're missing out on that. I get more people calling me today saying, hey, how do I get into pharmaceutical sales? How do I get into diagnostic sales? You got to learn how to sell. And I think that's a good way to start.
Yeah, take your lumps. And look, I think the lumps are coming different these days. If I do talk about the SaaS world a little bit, they have that entry level role, the BDR, the SDR, who all they do is make cold calls and send emails all day long. That's taking your lumps a little bit, but we've kind of gotten away from the SaaS world. As much as I love the segmentation of roles, because now it's like there's one rep that only deals with inbound, right? And then there's another rep that only makes cold calls to set up meetings. And then there's another rep that takes those meetings and closes, that type of thing. And I think it's great from a company standpoint because that's the way you can scale. But the challenge with that is I think it slows the development of a fully developed sales rep. Right. Because with me, you and I, like when we got into sales, it was here's your territory, kid. Good luck. Right. You had to find, meet, close everything. And so the challenge with that is a lot more people got out of sales a lot faster because they were like, holy shit, I can't do all this stuff. Right.
Right.
But those who stayed and stuck with it got really good as a well-rounded sales professional.
Yeah.
And I think we're missing a lot of that right now, is that entry level, like, just get your teeth kicked in for a little bit. I was doing a podcast recently with this woman, and we talked about, like, I really think everybody coming out of college, I don't care what your job is, you should get like a set of steak knives, like 25 steak knives that you have to go sell door to door, right? You can't sell them to friends, you can't sell them to family or anything like that. And you can't get a job until you sell those 12 sets of knives, right? Just to feel what it's like to have to get uncomfortable and get in front of other people, right? Because sales is so universal, whether you go into entrepreneurship or whatever role you want to have in a business. You sell your ideas, you sell for funding, you sell, everything. And that skill is critical from a communication standpoint.
100%. Even if it's just learning how to think on your feet, right? Someone asks you a question, you've got to learn how to listen, number one, which a lot of people have a tough time with. Number two, you got to be able to think on your feet and come up with solutions that are real and a good fit for that particular, at that point, client. So yeah, I love it. I love that idea. In fact, I think I listened to that podcast you're talking about. There were a lot of good things that came out of that. We'll talk about your podcast here in just a little bit. Let me ask you this, and I ask this of everyone. So what is it that you do? And I'm sure a lot of it is your training, but what is it that you do today to stay sharp and stay focused and stay ready to be able to come out and do everything that you're doing for your clients?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with goal setting. I'm a big goal setter of where I want to be, and then backing into the numbers of what I need to do to stay organized, right? Because I'm also a shiny object guy, where if I don't have that guiding light, I'm like, ooh, that's, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden I've done nothing. And so a big thing about prioritization and goal setting for me, but also just kind of micro learning. I constantly am picking small things to improve on myself once a week, once a month. So I'll give you an example. Early in my career, I went to Toastmasters, right? Toastmasters, is public speaking and whatever. And they, count how many ums and ahs and all your weak words and filler words. And I was so appalled at how many I had. It was almost overwhelming for me I'm like, I'm a disaster. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a legitimate disaster. I say 700 times. I say maybe, possibly, and all these different things. I'm like, I can't fix this. But what I started to do was like, all right, I'm not going to boil the ocean here. Right. Let me pick one thing. So let me hyper focus on my ums this month. That's it. And what I would do, I tell everybody around me, hey, if you hear me when I'm presenting, or if I'm talking, or if I'm meeting with somebody, if you hear me say, I want, after that meeting, I want you to tell me how many times I said, right? And I would put sticky notes up on my computer that said, with a big X through it. Right. And then I got that out. Right. So I started when I was conscious of the problem and I started working on it, but focusing on that and only that, I was able to work on it. Right. And then next month I would pick something else. And then next month I would pick something else. So whether it's a new approach to cold calling and how I even as micro as how I introduce myself over the phone. Okay. So do I say, hi, Scott, this is John Barrows from JB Sales. How you doing today? Or do I say, hey, Scott, thanks for taking my call. Do you got a couple of minutes? Right. Okay. Which one of those works better? And for me, I think now more than ever, and this hopefully will help the audience here. I believe, sales is science, art, right? It's both. Mm-hmm. I personally think that sales should be much more of a science than an art, because the science lays the foundation for the art form to be that much more effective. The structure, the process we put in place. And somebody asked me recently, John, now that you're 45, if you could go back and tell your 22-year-old self something, what would it be? And my number one answer to that was A/B split test everything you do.
Test it all.
I mean that across the board. Say you're calling into, CFOs in pharmaceutical, whatever, right? Come up with 2 different messages to CFOs in that space. Make 20 phone calls to this approach, make 20 phone calls to that approach, see which one yields a higher response rate. Yeah. If you got one email that could be sent out to a whole group of people that all fit a similar profile, send the same email, but split it 25-25 and tweak the subject line, see which one gets a higher open rate. Objection handling. I don't know the best way to handle objections, but it's not, I always say it's not rocket science. It's just science. Write down an objection you're getting hammered on. Go on Google and type in best objection handling techniques, right? Find a couple that you like. The next 10 times that objection comes up, deal with it this way. The next 10 times, deal with it that way. That way you get better every day. Because we're now dealing in a world where sales is a brutal profession. Okay. What used to make it somewhat tolerable was that we were getting our asses kicked, but we'd at least be getting our asses kicked with a whole bunch of other sales reps in the office and a bullpen that we could commiserate with, right? Or we at least got to sit in front of the client, and every once in a while they'd be nice to us and grab, we'd be able to grab coffee with them. Now we're all sitting at home by ourselves, getting our asses handed to us. And it is really, really hard to get up and get motivated when that's the scenario, right? But if you become a scientist, you can actually get through this, and you can get through this stronger. Because let's put it this way. Say you make 50 dials in a day, right? Okay. And you get no meetings. That's a terrible day.
Terrible day.
But if you make 50 dials and you do 25 dials with this approach and 25 dials with that approach, and you still get no meetings, to me, that's not a bad day.
You've learned something.
Two approaches that don't work.
Right.
And if you can learn something, like you said, if you can learn something every day, you can get through this, and you're going to come out way stronger on the other end.
So true. We've got we've got a lot of lonely salespeople right now, and they need to almost find ways to gamify what they're doing to stay engaged and keep learning and keep going. And you're right. The bullpen was awesome because you would mess up on a call, and somebody's gonna start laughing their ass off and come at you and say something about it. Or when you get a big win, you've got a lot of people cheering you on. That's right. Yeah. And so we're missing that today. And in fact, it's interesting because think about, and we'll get back to this in a minute. Think about all of these people who are outside salespeople who are now stuck at home, and they're trying to figure out, which way is up and how do I continue to be productive? And frankly, their managers are trying to figure out how they can be productive as well. John, what ultimately, or I guess what initially got me interested in you was I saw some of your postings on LinkedIn. Like so many other people that we've had on the show, you're putting out tons of content. Your brand is everywhere, which is awesome. And that led me to your podcast, which I'm a follower of. And in fact, I told you earlier, I'm a member of your training programs as well. Yeah, so this podcast is costing me money, but I love the fact that you're putting so much out for people to learn from just for free. Why do you do that? Why are you doing that on LinkedIn? Tell me more about what you're doing in order to, I guess, what your ultimate goal is by putting out all this information for free.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's about elevating the profession, so I went back, Gary Vaynerchuk, I'm a big fan of, he's kind of crazy, but he's cool. I went to his program a while back. Well, not a program that you can actually go. It's called the 4D experience.
4Ds, sure.
So I did it. I was the second group that went through it. And what happened was, they bring you through all the different departments are doing. And then Gary comes in at the end and does a Q&A with you. But one of the things they did is, and I've always heard about, what's your why, right? What you got to have that northern light, like what's the why do you do what you do? And it was a perfect time for me because I was really trying to restructure and think about what the next steps were for my business. And my why is sales done right is trying to elevate the profession, because nobody, it's the default profession. Okay. Right. Again, finally, you're starting to see some universities. There's probably about 60 of them that you can get an actual major in right now. But that's just a new thing. And so it drives me crazy that this is the number one profession on the planet. And yet none of us are actually formally taught how to do it. Mm-hmm. Right. We just figure it out along the way. And I'm a big believer that if you come across something that works, I think it's almost incumbent upon us to share it, to try to elevate the overall profession, right? Yes, sales is an individual, right? But if you don't take that holistic approach of trying to make the whole greater than the parts, right? I think you're missing out. And for me, I've been blessed with some really cool experiences. I've learned a lot along the way. I know I got a lot more to learn. But when I got into this game about 10 years ago, like, shit, you got a better shot at seeing God back then of a sales trainer sharing their content,
That's
their
right.
deck or whatever
Absolutely.
it was, because it was like, I'm the smart one and this is my IP. And I mean, there ain't nothing new in sales. Like, give me a break. Any jackass that tells you there's something new in sales is just full of shit, because all it is a repurposed whatever. I mean, I could go back and read Sandler's shit from 20 years ago, or customer-centric selling, or what, you name it, right? And you think of anything that's happening today and you can reverse engineer it to find out, yep, that's what it was. It was just using a different medium to actually deliver the content or whatever it is. Right. So it's not about anything new. So for me, it's like, why not share it out there? Right. And I'm a big believer, going back to Gary Vee, jab, 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 right hook, right? The giver's gain mentality of the more you put out there, the more value you put out there, the more people will be attracted to you. And so that's why I give away. I tell people all this time, you don't have to buy anything from me. Between my blog, my resource library, and what I put out there on LinkedIn and what my team's doing right now, if you really wanted to, you could spend the time and get 95% of what I charge people for.
Yeah.
Now, why people pay for it is the structure, right? Is the learning path, is the context around that stuff and how it all fits together. It's like the same thing with Harvard, right? You can get a Harvard degree for free if you wanted to. Every course at Harvard is free. Online. Go ahead, take it. You're not going to get the degree. You're not going to get the thing, but you can be a Harvard grad, if you will, with the same stuff. There's somebody who's going to spend $80,000 a year to be there. So what I'm trying to do is just share it out there and hopefully share some good ideas and create that conversation going so we can rise the tide a little bit here.
Dude, it works. It definitely worked for me. I enjoy what you're putting out. And frankly, me joining for that annual membership, and we'll talk about it more, it was worth every bit of that, just based upon the content that I'd already received from you and the training that I'd already gotten from you. The problem is that I do it so often. I've got more wine at my house than I know what to do with because of Gary Vaynerchuk, right? The guy helps out, and then he's like, well, you should buy some wine then. I'm like, yeah, right. I should. So I do. Yeah, I'll never get through the wine that I have at my house.
Well, there's also actually a small thing on that one really quick. There's a psychology piece around this, and this is a tip for everybody listening. Go get the book. Have you ever read the book Influence by Robert Cialdini?
I don't think so.
So put this on your list, and for your listeners, please put this on your list. It's my favorite book. I'm not a reader here. I've read like 5 or 6 books in my life. This one is on the top of the list. It's not a book on sales. It's a book on psychology and why we do the things the way we do them, and all of it translates to sales. So one of the concepts, or one of the rules in there, is called the rule of reciprocity, okay. Right? Which is a human condition, right? When somebody asks for something, they feel obligated to give you something in return. When you give something to somebody, there's a slight, small psychological thing in there that says, man, I feel like reciprocating eventually, right? So if you get a ton of value, eventually there's almost this obligation where, shit, man, I gotta pony up and buy that wine. I gotta pony up, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So it does come back around, and it is a psychology thing. It's not a trick. It's not a technique. It's a real thing.
Yeah. And it must work, because I could have done the 4Ds program and a lot of other stuff for the amount of money I've spent on wine. So it's working. I know a lot of your stuff is dealing with the SaaS community, right? Mm-hmm. And for those out there in the life sciences group, software as a service is a very large community out there. And John does a lot of training in that area. But John, I think that there are areas of that have been missing in life sciences. You talked about the SDR role, and there's groups within even recruiting that are talking about an SDR role for recruiting. But let's talk about that for a minute. Do you think that there's parts of the SaaS world that should be making their way into life sciences right now, especially given the pandemic and people working from home?
Yeah. I mean, well, I think we can all pull from each other, but I think SaaS is a unique industry in the sense that it's almost over technology, the focus, right? And it's taking a little bit the human. I actually almost wish that the SaaS reps would go meet with door-to-door, relationship develop other industries to understand what, I don't want to say real sales is, but understand what it's like to have to go into an office, talk to somebody face to face, develop that relationship, because SaaS is so like, instant gratification, like let's go. And so I think we can both learn from each other. But for the stuff that I think, life sciences and such can learn from SaaS, it's about leveraging the technology to do the stuff that we shouldn't necessarily be doing, right? So, it's kind of like a 4-hour work week, right? That book.
Sure.
It's, you always want to outsource the stuff that figure out what your hourly rate is, and then, go find somebody. If there's a thing that you do that somebody else can do cheaper, outsource it so you can keep doing what you're doing. Technology has a lot to do with that. So here's a tip. There's a product out there that I'm a huge fan of. It's called Crystal Knows.
Okay.
And it's not a drug site, but it's Crystal, Knows. And what it is, so I'm going to park that for a second. What we used to have is when I showed up at your office, Scott, I usually spend the first 10 to 15 minutes kind of figuring you out. You know what I mean? Like, what kind of vibe are you, right? Now, I see you're a fisherman, like that type of crap, right? And
or loud or verbose, and you're trying to match that to build that rapport, of course.
Yeah. Because there's a big thing about mirroring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I can mirror you and you're in my style or similar, you're going to be more open to me, right?
Right.
If I'm like on fire and you're a really passive, like you're going to hate.
It's not going to work, right?
So we would usually try to figure that out, right? We've lost that. We've lost, because now it's, okay, you got a half an hour. What do you got, kid? Go, right? So we got to find some tools these days to skip the line a little bit, right? And Crystal Knows is one of my tools that I skip the line. What it does is it's a disc profile. So, disc, Myers-Briggs, all that stuff. So I can put your name, and it's a Chrome plugin. And for everybody listening, I think you get 10 free views of profiles, and then you have to pay for it. But it's like the best $30 a month I've ever spent. I put your name in there, Scott, and in LinkedIn, it's a Chrome plugin. So in LinkedIn, little thing comes out, click on that. It gives me a full disc profile of you and tells me how I can sell and how you and I match and what best way to sell to you is.
Okay.
So now I put your name in there, and if you're a high D and I'm a high D, I don't have to worry about that part, right? Because I could just be me. But if you're a high I or a high S or a high C, I know I got to adjust my style coming into this, because I don't have that luxury anymore of meeting with you and developing the rapport up front.
That's a cool tool. I like that.
Tools like that, tools like Owler, OWLER, where I can take all my accounts and put them, it's like Google Alerts on steroids, and get alerts about what was happening in my client. So I don't have to always go and do research, try to find new reasons to reach out to them. SaaS, the segmentation of roles. I'm a little in the middle of this right now, because I think the SDR, and again, for those listening, sales development role, that's the one who just makes cold calls to set up meetings for the account executives or the sales reps. I think that model's going to break. I think it's great for businesses because it helps scale, because you can get a young kid, 22 years old, pay him 50 G's a year, get them to, beat the crap out of them for a little bit. And then they evolve to, grow up into your transition. So it's a great scale, but it's not a really good model from the client perspective, because, you have to talk to 4 people before you actually end up talking to somebody who knows what they're talking about, type of thing. So
that's right.
I think we're moving back to full cycle sales with account-based marketing and that type of thing, supporting full cycle sales reps. So I'm a little in the middle of should you adopt that. Now, I think it's good to have some kids inside just making calls to get meetings with people, but that doesn't remove the need for the sales rep to do it themselves. Okay. Yeah.
I think it's a great training ground, though, isn't it? I mean,
it's a great
training ground. It's good for that individual who stepped into the role. It's good for the company to get a sense of, hey, is this somebody that can be grown up and built up to be something else within the organization? But even the SDR role, I think in SaaS, is a pretty short-term job, right? I mean, people are put in there to get out of it.
12 to 18 months. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're seeing it becoming a more of a lifer role, right? Because, and especially in this world, there's a lot of kids who are like, you know what? I just like making calls. Like some kids are just not good at closing. So you said, your skill was you put me in front, you get me to close and I'm in, right? There are other kids that, like I got one on my team, James, I love him like a brother, right? This kid is fantastic on the prospecting side. The kid can't close a door though, right? So we tried to get him into that AE role and it was a disaster. And I was like, whoa. And we just, after talking it through, he doesn't like that. Right. You know what I mean? He doesn't enjoy that. He enjoys the front end. So there's people who are starting to be full cycle, full-time inside BDR, SDR roles and saying, why? I I don't always have to go there. You know what I mean? Like, so yes, it is a starting ground, but the beauty is now, because it's becoming so data and analytics driven,
right. Mm-hmm.
that it's actually an avenue, I think, to go into marketing, operations, or sales.
Yeah.
So you get in there, and that's the last thing I'll say on what I think, maybe the life science and can learn from the SaaS world is really being very hyper focused on analytics.
Yeah. Know your numbers, know your information.
Exactly. And constantly evolving and making decisions based on that data, not just because you're working harder.
Not only that, know your customer, right? This is a time that if you don't know your customer, or, from a training standpoint, the persona of who your ideal customer is, you've missed out. And we've had 8 months. We're going to have a few more months to figure this out. If you haven't done it yet, now's time to start.
You better, because anybody right now who's waiting for it to go back to normal I think they're already dead. I think they're already a dinosaur, because this ain't going back to normal, whatever normal was, by the way. But customers are getting used to this. So forget about sales reps for a second. Clients, the buyer is getting used to this, and they're liking it.
Mm-hmm.
They're liking it because, look, don't get me wrong, there's certain relationships that everybody, that I miss. And there's certain industries, obviously, that really enjoy that type of face-to-face type of thing. But the more efficient we get with this remote, the more times I can meet with 6 vendors in a day instead of 1 vendor in a day. And I can do it in a half an hour instead of an hour. And I don't have to do all this fluff. And I don't have to feel bad if the sales rep brings me lunch and I don't really like it. You know what I mean? Like, they're getting used to it. So if we're not getting used to it, we're going to want to wake up very, very soon and be irrelevant.
Right. So now more so than ever, it's time to sharpen the sword, get better at your craft, be a better salesperson. I said this, we had Chris Walker on the show. I think marketing is more important now than it ever has been, because customers are making decisions about who they want to buy from or what they want to buy, even before seeing a sales rep. That's when they're reaching out.
So I mean, corporate executive board, they came out with a challenger sale, right? And they talk about, by the time somebody comes to us, they're already 60 to 70% of the way through the sales process.
Right.
And to put a pin on that one, G2 Crowd. So G2 Crowd, right? B2B review website. Mm-hmm. I trained their team. And as I was sitting there in the kickoff, I almost fell out of my chair when I heard this one. G2 Crowd is the top 200th most trafficked website on the internet. So Amazon, Google, Facebook, you name it, and you have a B2B review website as the top 200 trafficked website on the internet. That's telling me that clients are doing far more research on us before we are on them.
Yeah.
So if the days of, hey, Scott, tell me about your business, that shit has sailed.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think that's actually one of the most insulting things you can say to anybody at this point, is that first of all, you're going to take my most valuable asset, which is my time, and you're going to roll in and say something dumb like, tell me about your business, when all you had to do was a quick little Google search right before we got on this call,
right,
and find out talk about marketing. I mean, companies spend millions of dollars, SEO, all these different things to tell the world about their business. And the first thing you're going to do when you walk in there is say, tell me about your business. Or John, let me get a little background on yourself. Like, what the fuck? Like, go on LinkedIn, read it.
Do your work.
You know what I mean?
Right. Do what you need to do to walk in and bring value.
Earn it.
Yeah, that's not bringing value to your client.
No. Value is giving me time back. Value is being direct. Value is bringing a level of insight that I haven't heard before, but you got to know your homework before you can do that.
Yeah, and I think that level of insight is something that we want to talk about for a little bit as well, because you've actually got some training on your site talking about personal branding, and I feel like bringing value to people is part of what can help develop your personal brand. How do you think, especially as we look at our target audience, life sciences, diagnostics, genetics, people selling into hospitals, and even some selling into those companies, those diagnostic companies, helping them to build some of the products they're doing, how do those individual salespeople start to create value and build their personal brand today? How do they start?
Yeah, it's a little daunting, right? Because you look at it, you're like, oh man, like, am I late to the game here? The answer is no. The answer is no. We are just on. Like, if you talk, it's funny. I'm always looking at Gary, because Gary V stays 3, 4, 5 steps ahead on all the social platforms. Mm-hmm. But there's one platform that I am way ahead of Gary on, and it's LinkedIn. LinkedIn is saying
I thought you were going to tell me you were dancing on TikTok, but okay.
Oh,
So
God,
it's
no.
LinkedIn.
God, no, he's way ahead of me on TikTok. I don't even understand TikTok. I like whatever. I'm trying to figure it out, but no, LinkedIn, like he's like, oh, LinkedIn right now is where Facebook was 10 years ago and even though they have whatever, 700 million people on the platform, you know that less than 1% of people on LinkedIn actually create content.
Right. I know.
Less than 1%. And if you think you're going to post too often, there's no such thing, my friend. Like literally, because I mean, just look at your feed. I could post something right now and then you click on a refresh button and it is 20 rows deep. Right?
That's right.
So the easiest way, and this is where it took a little bit for me to figure this out. Because, you know, again, as a Gen Xer here, when social selling and brand building first hit, I was like, oh, great. You know, yet another thing I got to do to be successful in sales. Fantastic. Add it to the fucking list here, right? And the whole idea of tweeting and posting and all this shit, like it just bothered me, actually. I was like, this is stupid, right? But where it started to click for me was when I started looking at it as educating myself first. I should be educating myself on my industry. I should be educating myself on the trends that are going on and, you know, some of the personas that I go after, right? I mean, just from a business acumen standpoint, I should be staying up to date on that stuff, right? So what I started doing was I started looking at it as educating myself first. So I set up tools like there's another one out there called Feedly, Feedly.
Sure.
What Feedly is, RSS aggregator, right? So say you got like 4 or 5 different sales blogs that you like reading. Usually you had to go to 4 or 5 different sales websites or get 4 or 5 different emails to hit your inbox. Feedly, you can create a folder in Feedly called sales blogs, dump all your sales blogs in there, open it up, and you see all the headlines, right?
That's right.
So I create folders on content that I'm interested in learning about, but also my audience is. So for me, it's like artificial intelligence and sales. So I got a folder called AI in sales. And then what do? I go out on Google and I type in AI sales thought leaders 2020. And I see who's talking about it, what companies are talking about it, what individuals have blogs about this stuff. And I put them all in that folder. SaaS is my industry. So I follow all the thought leaders in SaaS, sales training, obviously, sales blogs and sales training. So all these little and then what I do is in the morning, Feedly's my morning paper. So I grab my grab my coffee, right? And so I get up usually 5:30 in the morning, run from 6:30 to 7:30 every morning. Instead of checking my fantasy leagues and getting all pissed off about that type of shit, or like reading the news and getting overly aggravated, I scan through data feeds and I read a few articles with the lens of educating myself first. And then when I find an article that I learned something from, and only when I find an article that I learned something from, I share it with my context. And this is one I directly stole from Gary Vee. Okay. Gary Vee talks about, everybody says content is king, content is king. He said, fine, if content is king, then context is God. And that got me thinking about marketing versus sales. Marketing is content, sales is context. If we as sales professionals are not putting any context around our content, then we're no different than marketing. And I have no idea why we're getting paid to do what we do. And again, you don't have to be the content creator. You have to be the content curator. Because think about it this way, Scott. Say I write a blog, a weekly blog. It's a pain in the ass. I've been writing it for 5 years. I'm running out of shit to say, right? So it takes me about an hour to sit down and write this thing, whatever. And then I send it to my team. They Grammarly it and, get it all optimized, put it on HubSpot, SEO it and whatever.
Sure.
So we're like 2 to 3 hours into one blog, right? One blog post. So now say I write that, right? And you and I are connected on social and you see my article, right? And you read it. And you think it's decent. So you share it. You're like, hey, really interesting article here by John right here. Some of my key takeaways of what he talked about were X, Y, Z, right? Blah. Now, somebody you are connected to reads my blog because you shared it, right? And they like it. Who do they thank?
They're going to thank me if I shared it.
Exactly. I might get another follower. I might be like, somebody might be, oh, I like John's voice here. But they're not going to say, thank you so much, John, for writing that article.
Yeah.
They're going to say, thanks, Scott, for sharing that article.
Yeah, very true.
You get all the credit. I did all the work.
That's true. John, if you could start sharing my articles, that'd be great. I've got 2 that go out each week. Every other week we got a podcast. I'll share yours. We'll see who gets more out of it.
Definitely.
But I agree with you. It's about putting information out there. I think people are scared too, right? I think fear holds so many people back, and I think fear keeps people from selling. And so you've got to let go of the fear. You've got to start putting yourself out there a little bit. And I think once you start doing it, I mean, listen, the first time I jumped in front of a camera, I wasn't excited about it, but I wanted to be a part of the conversation. And so we're here today because you kind of push the fear aside, you push forward. And I think a lot of that comes probably from our age, having that ability, because it's fear for us. My kids have no problem jumping in front of a camera. They're going to be great at this. I'm a little scared of what they're going to do, but they're going to be great at it. But I think for people our age, especially, this is a stretch. And so you got to stretch a little more and try to get past it.
If you're not, let's put it this way, if you're not getting uncomfortable, you're not getting any better. Period.
Yeah.
Right. Let's bring this to the workout world, right?
If
you go to the gym and you come home and nothing hurts, was that a good session at the gym?
Was not.
Nope. But if you come home and you can barely walk up the stairs because your legs are all wobbly and shit, and you're right, like something happened there. You built a muscle there, right? It's the same thing in sales. If you're not putting yourself, and look, you don't have to go ridiculous, but you do have to stretch yourself. And that's why micro stuff, you could say, let me put myself out there a little bit. And let's go back to social and building your brand. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? You post something out there and nobody engages.
That's right.
Oh no. Right. But trust me, if you do it with authenticity in the sense, and that's why people who build their brand just to build their brand, I think, are a joke. With people who build a brand who have no substance behind it are a joke. But and that's why, like, people who tag 700 people just because they want, somebody like me to come in and post on their thing, like that's a joke. But if you learn first and then share what you learned, the main benefit is you learning.
Right.
The secondary benefit is you building your brand.
And I feel like authenticity is very important. I call it the sniff test. I know I don't call it, everyone calls it that, but it's a sniff test. And I think it's evident very quickly if somebody is doing it for themselves or truly doing it to try and help others. Yeah.
You can sniff it out pretty easy. I mean, all you got to do is dig through and see, how many people are they following versus followers, that type of stuff. And yeah, it's pretty transparent these days.
Yeah, I think so. And I try to be overt about it sometimes. And, for everyone out there, when I initially sent John a message, John gets invited on shows like this probably dozens of times every day. I sent him a direct message and I followed up and said, look, I don't have anything to sell you. And I'm doing this as a service to my clients. Oh, and by the way, here's the things that I'm willing to just give back to you because I want you on the show. And I think it will help our audience. I think that more people should do that. Offer things back, right? Give back. And then if you've done it the right way, maybe you have the opportunity to ask for something in the future. But my whole goal for this was to give to the people that we work with on a daily basis. And we're getting great reviews. We're getting good people to call us back and say, thank you. And we'll see where it goes from there. But I think that if you're overt about what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish and it's genuine, people will respond.
Absolutely. And look, the challenge though is we are in such a short-term gratification world that's why people, they might get into brand building and social selling and sharing content, but they don't see any results in a month or two. And they're like, oh, this is pointless. This isn't a short-term thing. This is a long-term play. Your personal brand, your personal reputation, right? And maybe that's an easier way for people to think about it. Instead of brand, think about your reputation, right? That's going to carry you throughout the rest of your careers. And it's just going to get more important. I mean, people don't trust corporate brands anymore. They just don't. They trust personal brands. Yeah. Right? So be that personal brand that represents your corporation, right? So it's not that hard once you start being okay with the fact that nobody, who gives a shit if somebody comments on my post, who gives a shit? I'm doing this because I learned something. I'm sharing it out there because I'm trying to help, myself, but others who are kind of like me. Right. And I'm a big, karma person. What goes around comes around, man. Shit eventually comes around.
Couldn't agree more on that one. Very quickly, and I know we're going to have to wrap up soon, but let's talk about leadership. What is their role today? And we'll talk sales leadership, commercial leadership, because I feel like a lot of salespeople are, again, going back to that fear thing. They're afraid to put themselves out there because they're afraid of what their manager is going to say, or they're afraid of what the company is going to say. And for all of you out there, we understand there are certain things that you can't do on social media because of the companies you're associated with. But what's the role of those leaders today? What can they do to give their people permission to put themselves out there? How do they do that?
It is interesting because leadership does dictate a lot, right? I mean, everybody knows that reps don't leave companies, they leave managers.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's allowing freedom within structure. So giving some guidelines of what you can do and kind of the parameters, the guardrails, if you will, but allowing people to play within and allowing people to test certain things. Mm-hmm. So let's use the big example, like Google, right? Like Google, I think it's like one day a week, they have to work on something completely outside of Google.
Right.
And that's where some of the best inventions come from. And it has nothing to do with Google. It's just like literally go work on some crazy ass idea. I'm not saying we should do that in our world. What I'm saying is a manager should allow those reps to test out things that they think are going to bring value to themselves and the organization. So I'll give you a quick example here. What I used to do as a manager, every week, we would go through Mondays, we would go through our, our sales team meeting, forecast review and everything else. But then I would say, all right, everybody, what do we want to work on this week? Right? What do we want to work on? And it was stuff like, John, getting through gatekeepers, figuring out video selling, dealing with this specific objection, whatever it is, like whatever the kind of, I either have an itch to fix that problem or I want to try something that I read on a blog or whatever it is. Right.
Yeah.
And then what I would do is, so I had 7 people on my team. I would say, all right, who wants to own this one? Right. I'll own it. When I say own it, I don't mean go crazy with this and all of a sudden spend hours and hours. I mean, literally, like say it's handle the pricing objection, right? I mean, literally open up your laptop and Google what's the best way of handling the pricing objection, right? Read a few fucking blogs, pick one that you think is cool, right? Bring it back. Let's do a little role play on this sucker, right? See how, all right, we like this approach. Cool. Now, what everybody would do is we'd all have a notebook next to our desk. Mm-hmm. And we would write down challenge equals pricing objection. Approach equals feel, felt, found, reprioritization, clarify, whatever that. And then we kind of write out what you would say. And then I'd have a T-bar, right? Plus, minus. And what I would tell everybody is, look, no matter what, and that person who raised their hand said, I want to own it. They were the project manager of this thing.
Okay.
And so they would then have to coach people on that thing. Now, everybody, I would say, do whatever you want to do this week, okay? But when that thing happens, you got to use that approach. And you just got to say plus minus. Did it work? Did it not work? Right. Yeah. And then we would just, the project manager, if you will, would collect all, like coach during the week and, try it themselves. Right. And then collect the piece of paper at the end of the week. And then we just add up the numbers. Hey, everybody, we hit that objection 50 times last week. We got 20 positives and 30 negatives. That's actually not that bad. Let's put that on the list. Right. Next week, what do you guys want to focus? So this whole concept of continuous learning and continuous improvement, going back to when I was saying split testing and you can get through this mess if you learn something every day.
That's right.
As a manager, if your team is learning on a consistent basis and you create that culture of continuous improvement, you will build an incredibly valuable and team that executes at a really high level. And the reps will be excited to do it because they're learning. And again, you're not boiling the ocean here. You're just picking one small thing. And if some kid's like, hey, you know what? Like, I'll give you an example, like videos, right? I don't know if video selling is going to be good for your industry, but why not figure it out? Guess what? Here's a last, one more tip for everybody. You can do LinkedIn videos for free.
Yeah.
So you as long as you're one connected to somebody, you can go on to LinkedIn. If I were to message you right now, Scott, there's a little plus sign. It drops down and there's a video icon there. You push on that, a video comes up, and I can send you a video through LinkedIn that goes into your InMail. Maybe there's a rep out there that's like, that might be a good idea. And there's another rep out there be like, oh, our audience will never, doctors don't care. You know what I mean? They're not going to look at that stuff. But maybe, just maybe, one kid's going to say, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to do this. Yeah, hey, boss, can I try this out to see if this works? I'm going to test it and I'm going to come back to you with some data. And then send out 50 videos through LinkedIn and see how many responses you get and come back and blow that out, that other guy out of the water saying, yeah, guess what? Morgan did this. He sent 100 videos, got 41 responses in 18 meetings.
Yeah, it works. I can tell you, John, it works.
Right.
And they're smart about it, right? Because they don't have it linked to Sales Navigator, right? You can't just blast people with spammy videos. You've got to be connected to them. But if you're connected to someone, I find that if I send a video, 9 times out of 10, I get a response, and it's always, it might not be favorable of what I'm trying to do, but it's a favorable response of, hey, really appreciate the message. So that one's good. I like that one a lot.
And by the way, 2 more small things on video.
Yeah.
Video is a great way of handling objections and delivering proposals. You know how we used to be able to deliver a proposal on site and walk them through it, but
Sure.
now it's like, what do I do? It's like send the PDF, whatever, videoed, light up a video. You can put your little mug on the bottom corner and have the proposal up there. Hey, Scott, instead of just sending you a PDF here, I just wanted to kind of walk you through this proposal. You know, you had said your main priorities were here. Here's the components of our solution that I think will really make a difference. You can look through the details later. I just wanted to get this over to you, let you know I'm really excited about the opportunity to work with you. That right there, that personal touch on the proposal that you're about to send them makes all the difference in the world.
It sure does. So I also have Vidyard, big fan of it. I'll talk to you after this, and maybe we could put your link on here or something else. But I love the video idea. I think it gives you just one more opportunity to put yourself in front of people at a time where you're typically not able to do it.
Exactly.
John, how can people reach out to you? Maybe tell us about things that you have going on right now, whatever projects or things that you have that you want people to know about.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So jbarrows.com. So jbarrows.com. There you're going to find everything. So there's the blog, there's the, resources, the podcast. You can hit me up on LinkedIn, but you'll also see, if you do training for individuals, that's what you just signed up for, which is our whole new on-demand platform that has literally everything that we do. So all the training that I give to Salesforce, LinkedIn, and all those huge companies is all on that platform. And we're constantly putting new content on there on a regular basis. We're trying to make it kind of the Netflix for sales. And so there's personal branding stuff from James and social selling from Morgan and, my core programs and then tips and all sorts of stuff in there for I think it's like $400 at this point. So yeah, that's a great way to do it. Or like I said, just hit me up on LinkedIn and I'll share whatever free stuff that I got for you. And last one is Instagram. So where I'm doing a lot of one-on-one coaching for free is Instagram. So John, John, M as in Michael, Barrows, Barrows. That's my handle. Just hit me up and I'm happy to help out anybody who has any questions.
Yeah, very cool. For you guys out there in sales, I think in the past, especially growing up in big companies, I always looked for my company to provide me with my sales training. So I got stuck with Spin. If I were in one of these companies that I work with today, I'm going to get stuck with Challenger. Check out John's information, check out his site. I'm a member of his plan that he talked about. For the money, it's worth every penny. If I was in outside sales today, I would have bought it myself, wouldn't ask for anyone to pay for it, and I would try to get that competitive advantage. So you guys go check that out. Before I let you go, John, we are all about talent here, right? I want to always help people find the best talent in the market. I want to know what people look for. I want to know what they hire for. So for you, what are those things that you look for in talent? And what's that thing that if you find it, you say, I want that on my team every time?
Passion. I mean, grit and passion. Like I ask people, what are you passionate about? Not because I care, it's because I care how you describe what you're passionate about. Because you can teach skill, you can teach technique, you can teach all these things. You can't teach drive and you can't teach passion. So is that and also values. All right. I think it's important for everybody to kind of go through a value exercise. I have my 12 personal guidelines to success. That helps me make decisions, because if you and I have the same values, then you and I can argue all that we want, right? But as long as we have the core values, then I think we're going to be able to do some really special things together. If you and I values are off, then it's not going to work. And so values and grit and passion, right? Those are things that I look for first. And then experience, and then, all that other crap. Again, like I can teach all that stuff as long as you're willing to learn, as long as you're coach. And also, I guess one more thing would be coachability, right? Okay. Do you take direction? When I used to do interviews, I would interview a kid and then I would have them go through a cold call exercise with me about what they used to sell. And then they would come back in and I would give them feedback, and then I would tell them to go do it again. And no matter how bad that first call went, if they took my feedback and they applied it to that next call, I was like, all right, this is a kid I can work with here.
Very cool. Awesome. Two real quick last things. Mm-hmm. You mentioned on one of your podcasts what you teach your daughter about controlling the things that you can control. Yep. Give us that acronym. And then if you would, I'm going to let you close out the show the way you close out yours, because I like it.
Yeah. Thanks, man. So it's EAT. So it's focus on what you can control. And we came up with this little acronym that we do every morning with our little secret handshake. It's effort, attitude, and how you treat people. Those are the things you can control, right? You control your effort, how hard you work. You can control your attitude, whether it's positive or negative. You can control how you treat people. And so, that to me is something, we get caught up a lot with what's going on with politics right now in the world and all this other stuff, what's on TV. You can't control any of that shit. You can't control what the customer does, if they ghost you or not, whatever. So just control what you can control. And with that, how you treat people is really the important part there, right? Because that's how I end up all my podcasts, which is, go out there and make somebody smile today. Because even if you had a shitty day, if you made somebody smile, you had a good day. So
John Barrows, everyone. John, thank you. Really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Scott. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care, everyone. You've just listened to another Talent Talks podcast with Scott Rivers. Today's guest, John Barrows. I know that each and every one of you who listened today is going to get a ton of value. So do me a favor, reach out to John on LinkedIn. Let him know that you heard about him here on the Talent Talks podcast with Scott Rivers. I would appreciate that. In addition to that, check out his website, jbarrows.com. JB Sales is the company. jbarrows.com is where you can get to all of his information, the podcast, the blog, any events that he has, and also that individual training, which I talked about. And actually, as I mentioned in the show, I bought on an annual basis, and the content's fantastic. John brings a lot of value. Guys, we're wrapping up 2020, and my goal for this podcast has always been just to bring value to salespeople in the industries that we serve. I think we're doing that this year. We're going to finish next week with James Carberry, another awesome person to talk to who brings a different spin on networking and sales. So I'm looking forward to that one as well. Thank you for being here today. Take care, everyone.